Amy Samet. My TED Talk. My TED Talk, Amy Samet.
I'm sitting in the driveway of my brother Ted's house in California in a rental car, and I'm afraid to go inside. I haven't seen Ted for 20 years. I don't know what I'm about to step into. I don't know who Ted will be. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests. This is the story of how I went to California in 2016 on a mission to save my brother. This is my TED Talk. I grew up in Ohio, the youngest of 4 kids. It was Ted, Bob, Dave, and me. Ted is the oldest, the tallest, the strongest, the smartest, and the most diabolical of all my brothers. Ted is brilliant. At age 10, he understood electromagnetism. At age 12, he was building rockets in the basement of our house and shooting them off the roof. Did you know you could use a magnifying glass to burn a hole in your little sister's inflatable kiddie pool? Ted did. Growing up, the 4 of us kids spent a lot of time unsupervised. This is when we would play a game called King Ted. So named because Ted was the undisputed king of bad table manners. The object of the game was to try to unseat him as king, but it couldn't be done. Bob and Dave and me, we just had amateur moves, like burping and eating off each other's plates. Ted would stand on a chair, container of sour cream in one hand, serving spoon in the other, and say, "Who wants sour cream?" The result was sour cream on all our clothes, all our faces, the walls of the kitchen, and the ceiling. It was fantastic. He was our hero. He was our king. Ted went to MIT, then Stanford. Then he landed a job as an aerospace engineer at NASA in Palo Alto, California. In 1984, he bought a little bitty house in the area for $108,000. Today, his little bitty house is worth $1.5 million. Now I'm going to tell you some things about Ted that I'm not going to be able to explain. Believe me, if I could, I would. Ted doesn't own a cell phone, or a microwave, or a clothes dryer, or a car. He won't buy anything new as long as the old one still works. And with enough duct tape and paperclip, he can make it work. Ted doesn't fly on airplanes. Ted doesn't go to doctors. First I heard he was limping. Then I heard he was walking with a cane. He still wouldn't go to a doctor. And I thought, that is so Ted. But then, when I heard he couldn't walk or talk anymore, and he still wouldn't see a doctor, that was too weird, even for Ted. He was going straight downhill with no brakes. It was suicide. I knew I had to go see him. So I'm sitting in a rental car in his driveway, summoning up the courage to go in. The moment I step inside the house, I feel like I have entered another dimension. I am standing in a room that has no room in it. All of the available space is taken up by stacks and stacks of boxes and papers and books and clothes and gadgets and shoes. There's an accordion, there's a telescope, there's a kite, there are stacks on the chairs and the sofa, there are stacks on the stacks. Only a narrow path makes it possible for me to get to Ted's room. Because there has been no medical intervention, there are no machines, and there are no tubes. Ted just looks like a regular guy in bed in his pajamas. I've seen Ted in his pajamas a million times. Growing up, we spent our whole lives in our pajamas, jumping up and down on the beds, eating Cocoa Puffs, making forts out of the sofa cushions, and watching Rocky and Bullwinkle on TV. Ted, how are you? I've been better. I knew Ted. Of course I knew Ted. I knew his fingers. I knew his voice. I knew his face. Seeing him again was like hearing a song I hadn't heard for 20 years and finding I still knew all the words by heart. On this trip, I found that there was more to admire about Ted than I had ever imagined. His bravery, his composure, the way he still had his humor, even in light of everything he was facing. He even thanked me for coming. He had good manners after all. I realized that Ted didn't need saving. He knew exactly who he was. He knew what he wanted, and he had the courage of his convictions. How many of us can say that? I didn't have to be there trying to save the day. The important thing was just to be there. I went to California hoping to convince Ted to see a doctor. Instead, I would come away respecting his right to live and die on his own terms. And I would be forever thankful that I traveled 1,729 miles to tell Ted 3 things that matter. You're still my brother. You're still my hero. And I still love you.